Hey everyone, and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm back with another update coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've got a very big lineup of news to share with all of you today. Today's date is September 15th, 2025, and it's Monday. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and I hope you're all having a great day so far. We've got a lot of big news to get into with this war update. We're actually going to start out with a very big story out of Poland today, as Poland is now calling on NATO allies to shoot down Russian drones and missiles over Ukrainian skies to establish a no-fly zone. Let's talk about this new report here on your screen. Poland urges NATO to impose a no-fly zone over Ukrainian airspace. Poland's foreign minister is urging NATO allies to consider establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine in response to Russia's drone attacks, warning that shielding Ukraine would protect Europe. Okay, so this is a picture of the foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, out of Poland today. And he's calling to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. This is in response to the drone attack that took place last Wednesday as Poland came under a pretty massive drone attack. Somewhere around 20 to 23 drones were reportedly entering into Polish airspace. And the Polish Air Force, along with NATO allies, had to scramble fighter jets to shoot down a lot of these incoming drones, some of them even crashing in towns inside of eastern Poland. So Poland now calling for this no-fly zone over Ukraine to not only protect Poland, but all of Europe. And this is interesting because a lot of these drones were reportedly actually coming from Belarus. So even though Ukrainian skies could possibly be closed in the future, and maybe these drones could start getting shot down by NATO, these drones could still pass through Belarus, and apparently that's what we saw happening last Wednesday, according to the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He claimed that some drones were actually coming from Belarus as well. So it would protect in some ways, but if Russia were to use Belarusian airspace, it would probably not protect them in that way. So we're going to talk more about this today. We also have a report that Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the National Security Council out of Russia, he's again threatening NATO with war after Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski's statement today calling for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. So looks like Medvedev coming out of the cave and once again calling on NATO, stating that they were going to be directly at war if they impose this no-fly zone. Also, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov also claiming that NATO is directly at war with Russia as well. So two major statements coming out for the Kremlin today stating that Russia is either directly at war with NATO. If not, they will be at war with NATO in the future if this no-fly zone goes into effect. We also have numerous other reports we're going to share with you here today as well. Let's go ahead and get into this. Let's hop on over here to X with Nexta. And this report states Sikorski urges NATO and EU to impose no-fly zone over Ukraine. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski has called on NATO countries to start shooting down Russian missiles and drones directly over Ukraine. And he says, quote, "We are technically capable of doing this, but the decision must be made jointly," he told FAZ. According to Sikorski, this would benefit Europe, as the West should learn from Ukraine's experience in countering drones and prepare for its own defense. He also urged NATO to take control of Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. And he says, quote, "If one of these ships sink, Europe will face an environmental disaster of unprecedented scale," the minister warned. Here's another picture of Radoslaw Sikorski, the foreign minister out of Poland. So let me know how you feel on this. I mean, we have heard this again before from Poland. Ukraine has called on NATO allies to help them shoot down incoming drones and missiles from Russia in the past. I'm not sure if NATO would actually impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. There have been talks that they might do this. But he says here that they are capable of doing so, but apparently the decision must be made jointly. NATO allies have to decide on this together. So we'll see if they hold a vote on that. Maybe they will, or maybe they won't in the future. He's also warning that apparently these shadow fleet vessels that are traversing through the Baltic Sea that Russia uses to transport oil around the world illegally and still sell oil face a major environmental disaster if one of these happen to sink. That's been something warned about for a long time now. So pretty large statement from Sikorski today urging NATO to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Let me know how you feel on that down in the comments. Now, Vicegrad 24, Dmitry Medvedev again threatens NATO with war after Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski's call for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And he says, quote, "If taken seriously, the provocative idea of Kiev and other idiots about creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine and allowing NATO countries to shoot down our drones will mean only one thing: a war between NATO and Russia. wrote former Russian president and current Security Council deputy chair Dmitry Medvedev. Earlier, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski said it would make sense for Ukraine to formally request third countries to intercept drones in its airspace. So, yeah, again, this was the response from Dmitry Medvedev today, stating that if NATO gets involved shooting down these drones and missiles in Ukraine, this will mean that NATO is directly at war with Russia. So, let me know how you feel in that statement as well. We've heard many statements from Dmitry Medvedev in the past calling for war with NATO, and also stating that, many times he wants to nuke nations inside of Europe, even nuke the United States. So we know that Dmitry Medvedev definitely is a war hawk. He speaks very provocatively like this quite often. And once again, another huge statement from Medvedev today. Now, Formosa Defender, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated earlier today while speaking to reporters from the state-run news agency RIA Novosti. He says, quote, NATO is at war with Russia. This is obvious and requires no further proof. NATO is de facto involved in this war. NATO provides both indirect and direct support to Kiev. Therefore, it can be said with absolute certainty that NATO is at war with Russia. Isn't that interesting? And I can't say this is the first time that the Kremlin hasn't said this. I want to say they've stated things like this before, maybe just worded differently, that that Russia is at war with NATO because NATO is directly supplying weapons over to Ukraine. I mean, they've been doing that since pretty much the beginning of this war. But yeah, this was the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov today claiming that NATO is directly at war with Russia. And this is due to all the help that they're giving over to Ukraine, providing all these weapons and whatnot. So probably also secretly commenting on Sikorski's statement today that NATO might possibly get involved shooting down drones and missiles over Ukrainian skies. Now for Vicegrad 24, Polish president approves NATO troop deployment in response to Russian drone intrusion. Polish President Karol Nawrocki signed authorization for NATO forces to be stationed in Poland as part of Operation Eastern Sentry, the National Security Bureau reported. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte announced on September 12th the launch of Operation Eastern Sentry aimed at strengthening positions on the eastern flank. The operation will involve troops from the UK, Germany, Denmark, and France. The decision comes in response to Russian drones entering Polish airspace on September 10th. Okay, this is very big news, and this was actually being released yesterday, this information that the Polish president approved NATO troop deployments in response to the Russian drone attack from last week. So this lines up with the story that we heard last week as well, that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was announcing that NATO was going to be launching a new operation called Eastern Sentry to bolster NATO forces on the eastern flank. So in a lot of these countries like Poland, maybe some of the Baltic nations, we could see more troop buildups in those areas from NATO forces, but especially inside of Poland, they're going to be beefing up their defenses. There's lots of air defense going to Poland right now, aircraft as well, and we should be seeing more NATO troops showing up inside of Poland here very soon. So very big news out of NATO today. Now Euromaidan Press. Ukrainian Special Forces destroy Russian Buk M3 air defense system worth $40 to $50 million. HUR Special Operations units successfully struck the 9K317M Buk M3 SAM system near Oleksandrivka in occupied Zaporizhia Oblast on September 14th, 2025. So apparently yesterday is when this strike took place down in the Zaporizhia Oblast. This was a Ukrainian drone directly striking a Buk M3 air defense system, and we just had reports, I think it was back Friday or Saturday of last week, that allegedly we may have had two more of these Buk M3s that were destroyed. That was going to be one in the Luhansk region of Ukraine on the eastern side, and also in the southeastern side, another one may have been hit in the Donetsk region as well. So very, very big hits here. This could be over 100 million in losses from the Russian military, if that's three confirmed over the past 4 or 5 days now. So very big. Apparently we had one hit here yesterday. Now NOAA reports 3 Fab 250 bombs were dropped by Russian forces on central Kramatorsk this evening. 9 civilians were injured, according to the city council. So sad news to report here, but Kramatorsk getting hit very hard once again. We just talked about this city like a week or two ago, I believe. This is going to be down in southeastern Ukraine. A very large city in the Donetsk Oblast came under attack by Russian glide bombs. 3 Fab 250s. These are 250 kilogram glide bombs being dropped in civilian areas over here. Lots of destruction here. Look at all these trees that were blown down. and lots of damage to civilian housing. There's still quite a lot of people that are living here. A lot of people have left this city, but there still are civilians living in this area, and it's really not too far away from the front line. So the Russians carrying out another barbaric attack here on this city. Lots of destruction, as we can see in these photos. Now for Max 25, drones damage installations and pipelines at two Bashneft plants in Ufa, according to Astra. And Astra is going to be a Russian Telegram channel, very reliable source. We report a lot of their information. It says a UAV struck AVT-1 installation, damaged a gas pipeline and flare manifold, and caused a fire. Another UAV fell in the territory of Bashneft UNPZ Ufa oil refinery, hit the AVT-6 installation, and damaged two pipelines with water and nitrogen. So it looks like we had two facilities being hit in this area, actually. Back on Saturday, I reported this to you guys. The Nova Ufa oil refinery came under attack in the Bashkortostan region, approximately like 14 to 1,800 kilometers away from the front line or the border of Ukraine. Very deep strike into Russia was taking place here. This was a picture coming out showing a huge fire that broke out on the Nova Ufa oil refinery after it was hit by a Ukrainian drone. So apparently we had two strikes, and it looks like very critical infrastructure at some of these facilities located in Ufa were hit and damaged over there. So not sure if we have any kind of shutdown at any of these plants over here, but regardless, some pretty major damage here according to this information. Now from the Ukrainian Review, Ukraine will restrict imports of diesel fuel originating in India, which purchases a significant portion of its crude oil from Russia starting October 1st, according to Reuters today. The loss of a key Ukrainian oil refinery this summer had forced traders to compensate with imports, purchasing diesel fuel from India. Even the Ukrainian Defense Ministry has sought some Indian fuel as it met post-Soviet standards. Here's a report today from Reuters. Ukraine to curb Indian diesel imports amid Russian oil ties, analyst says. Okay, so it looks like Ukraine is going to be cutting off diesel fuel imports from India, as obviously right now the Trump administration imposed some tariffs onto India for purchasing Russian oil and also buying weapons and military equipment from the Russians as well. So we know that there's a lot of push right now for Europe to possibly get involved as well and impose some sanctions onto China, possibly even India also, to force Russia to end this war. So it looks like Ukraine has taken a step ahead of time, cutting off diesel imports from India, as right now India is being hit by these tariffs coming from the U.S. with lots of pressure to halt them from purchasing oil from Russia. So very big news today. Looks like Ukraine is able to do that, cutting off these diesel imports for right now. Now from Z's Maxim, Trump finally labeled Russia the aggressor in the war against Ukraine, further demonstrating a hardening of his position toward Moscow, according to Politico today. Referring to Ukrainian and Russian troop casualties, Trump told reporters Sunday, quote, 8,000 soldiers have died this week from both countries, some more from Russia, but when you're the aggressor, you lose more. I stopped 7 wars, and I thought this one was going to be easy for me, but this has turned out to be tough, Trump said Sunday, referring to the Russian invasion. I think I have to do all the talking. They, Zelensky and Putin, hate each other. They hate each other so much they can't breathe. Here's a report from Politico today. Trump finally calls Russia the aggressor in war on Ukraine. After resisting the label for months, a U.S. president goes there. So interesting statement from Trump. I mean, we have heard Trump going back and forth a lot. Sometimes he speaks like this about Russia, and then other times he doesn't, and he starts speaking aggressively towards Ukraine. Is this a sign that Trump is getting more serious here? Is he ready to impose sanctions? I mean, he has stated that many times. I do have a statement to show you guys here in just a moment, speaking to reporters, calling on Europe to get more involved and putting pressure onto China, for example, maybe even India or Brazil, but mostly China for purchasing oil from Russia. So we know Trump is taking more of a hardening stance towards Russia right now, but really we have to wait and see what his actual actions are going to be. He can make these statements all he wants, but we have to wait for actual action coming from him. So we'll see what he decides to do here in the near future. Now here's that report from Null Report. Says Trump, NATO and Europe need to step up. My friends in Europe are still buying Russian oil. That's unacceptable. Their sanctions aren't tough enough. I'm ready to go forward with sanctions, but they need to match them. Right now they talk but don't act. We don't buy Russian oil. They shouldn't either. Yeah, that was a statement from Trump today. I want you guys to see this clip, about 53 seconds. Take a look at this.
Do you expect NATO to issue sanctions against Russia as you asked them to do over the weekend?
Well, they're not doing the job. NATO has to get together. Europe has to get together and do it. Look, they're my friends. but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
But just to clarify, you wouldn't move ahead until NATO moves ahead.
Well, I'm ready to move ahead, but they have to do it. I think they will. But right now they're talking and they're not doing. Look, they're buying oil from Russia. We're not buying oil from Russia. They're buying a lot of oil from Russia. That's not the deal. So
You expect NATO
So we got Trump telling reporters here today that, once again, the United States is not going to act on Russia unless Europe stops buying oil from Russia and also put some pressure onto China as well. There was a report last week that Trump wanted Europe to impose somewhere around 50 to 100% tariffs onto China to stop them from purchasing Russian oil as well. Then the U.S. would come in with their sanctions at the same time. So that's obviously going to be a major hurdle here. Some nations like Hungary and Slovakia most likely going to not stop purchasing Russian oil. And that's going to make it difficult for the Trump administration to come in as well if that's one of their demands, to start putting pressure onto Russia also. So huge statement today. Let me know how you feel on that. Now, Max 25, China said it firmly opposed the United States calling on the G7 and NATO countries to impose secondary tariffs over purchases of Russian oil, pledging to take measures to safeguard its rights and interests, according to Reuters today. The Chinese Commerce Ministry urged the U.S. to be prudent in its words and deeds and to solve differences through equal dialogue. Here's a report today. China opposes U.S. pushing for tariffs over Russian oil purchase. So yeah, the Chinese Foreign Ministry came out commenting on this whole idea that the United States and Europe might impose some tariffs onto China for purchasing Russian oil. Again, we already see some tariffs onto India right now. I think the United States is imposing 50% tariffs onto India for purchasing oil from Russia. China is next in the spotlight right now, and could we see this happen? We do have China coming out saying they're going to safeguard their interests and take whatever countermeasures are needed to continue purchasing this oil from Russia. So we'll have to see what's going to happen here, but China coming out and warning the U.S. and Europe as they push for these tariffs onto China. Now, Max 25, U.S. military officers made a surprise visit to Belarus to observe joint Russia-Belarus Zapad 2025 war games, according to Reuters. Here's a report today. U.S. military officers pay surprise visit to Belarus to observe war games with Russia. Yeah, so Russia's got, I think, one more day. I think on the 16th, tomorrow, is when these Zapad 2025 military exercises that kicked off on the 12th will be ending. Okay, so they'll be ending tomorrow, and apparently U.S. military officers were paying a surprise visit. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, I will note it wasn't just U.S. Air Force officers that were showing up over there, but we did have multiple other nations that were observing these war drills. I have some pictures today to show you, actually. Here's from next, Americans at Lukashenko and Putin's drills. Unexpected guests at Belarusian training grounds. U.S. officers shake hands with Defense Minister Viktor Krenin during a joint Russia-Belarus military exercise observed by representatives from 23 countries, including U.S., Turkey, Hungary, and China. Against the backdrop of Donald Trump's envoy visiting Lukashenko last week and announcing a softening of sanctions, the gesture looks highly symbolic. What seemed impossible just yesterday, American officers standing by Russian maneuvers, has now become the new reality. Yeah, isn't that interesting that, with this ongoing war inside of Ukraine and all this pressure that's about to get put onto Russia, we have U.S. military officers showing up and observing these Zapad 2025 military exercises ongoing inside of Belarus right now. And at the same time, we've got Europe strongly reacting to this. Poland is deploying 40,000 troops to the border with Belarus. They've closed their eastern airspace. Baltic nations, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia have done the same. So very interesting that we had all these different countries observing these military drills. Apparently it was a much larger military drill than I thought it was going to be. But let me know how you feel on U.S. Military officers showing up over here to these Zapad 2025 military exercises in Belarus with Russian forces. Now from next, the U.S. Congress will not adopt a new sanctions package against Russia without Trump's approval. This was stated by House Speaker Mike Johnson. Speaking on CBS News, he added that he is inclined to support such measures if they are endorsed by the president. He says, quote, "I'm convinced that desperate times require desperate measures, and the time for appropriate sanctions against Russia is long overdue. There is strong demand for this in Congress. This is why we are ready to work with the White House and our colleagues in the Senate to achieve it," Johnson said. This is going to be Mike Johnson right here, the House Speaker. And yeah, that's what he was stating towards CBS News, that apparently they're not going to be acting on any sanctions towards Russia at all unless they are endorsed by Trump. So again, this is how it's going to go. Europe has to stop buying Russian oil. They are most likely going to be pushed to enforce 50 to 100% tariffs onto China at the same time. And if that happens, that's when the U.S. will come in with their own sanctions and really force an end to this war. Now, if Europe and the United States come together collectively, I think it could definitely put some major pressure onto Russia to force them to stop the fighting in Ukraine. That looks like this could be the route that it's going, but really it's going to start with Europe. Is Europe going to be able to give up Russian oil and at the same time impose these major tariffs onto China? Now, Spravdy Stratcom Center, Russia's gasoline crisis worsens by the day, with entire cities now on the verge of empty. This is going to be in the Belgorod region. So this is just over the border from Ukraine's Kharkiv region. We're really starting to see this fuel crisis get worse. I just reported to you guys, I think it was Saturday or Friday of last week, that apparently 20 regions inside of Russia, not only on the eastern side in the Far East, but also on the western side closer to Moscow, numerous regions are being affected by this. This is going to be the Belgorod region just over the border of Ukraine, another gas station out of fuel.
Ситуация с бензином, короче, не меняется. Сотого нету, 95-го нету, даже 92-го нету. Короче, остался только дизель есть. У меня запас хода всего лишь там 40 километров осталось. И все. Так что, слушайте, бензина в Белгороде нету. Вот такая вот история. Вот. Ситуация с бензином.
Okay, so I do apologize. There's no subtitles here on this video, but there's one part right here where he shows this sign. And if you look at here, 92, 95, and 100 octane, all these fuels completely out. I'm not sure if that's like a diesel fuel up here, but we have been seeing 92 and 95 octane that a lot of just general civilians use for their vehicles inside of Russia. Just so many gas stations running out of fuel, and it is continuing to worsen as Ukraine continues to also go after oil refineries inside of Russia, which is majorly causing this problem right now. There was also reports yesterday that Ukraine went after another oil refinery up in the Leningrad region. I think that is the Kurishi oil refinery, and they struck it yesterday, causing a major fire over there. So absolutely huge. Ukraine is continuing to push Russia into a fuel crisis. Now from the Ukrainian Review, Kellogg says if Putin was winning, he'd be in Kiev, west of the Dnipro, on Odessa, and he'd change the government. Russia is in fact losing this war. Yeah, this was a statement today from Keith Kellogg, the special envoy from the Trump administration in the U.S., and he was just recently in Kiev. He might still be over there right now, but he was speaking at a conference, and today, this is what he stated, that Russia is not winning this war. They're actually losing. Now, in some ways, I might have to agree with that, because let's just look at the front line, for example. Russia is really not moving much. You know, throughout the duration of this year, they have not gained a whole lot of territory inside of Ukraine. They still do not have control of the Donbass on the eastern side. That's why Russia was trying to get Ukraine to give up the rest of the Donetsk region and the Luhansk region through a peace deal. That way they could just gain it without having to do that militarily. Russia's moving at a snail's pace inside of Ukraine. They're taking on massive losses, lots of military equipment being destroyed. We're reporting pretty much every day air defense systems being destroyed, radars being destroyed down in Crimea, oil refineries getting blown up all across their territory. They're taking on massive losses here while they move very, very slow inside of Ukraine. And don't forget to mention troop losses as well. They've lost over 1 million troops dead or wounded on the battlefield, and that's just absolutely staggering, the numbers that we're seeing coming out from this war. So crazy statement from Kellogg today. Let me know if you agree with him on that statement. Now, Max 25, Norway has deployed a large-scale training camp in eastern Poland for Ukrainian soldiers, with instruction provided by Norwegian instructors, according to NRK. Camp Jomsburg, located somewhere in the forests of eastern Poland, is described as one of the largest camps Norway has ever set up, with hundreds of Norwegian soldiers present. Training at the camp includes highly realistic combat simulations and specialized thematic modules. The first focus on stress and combat conditions and control methods. All right, so very big news here. Norway has set up a huge training camp inside of eastern Poland. We don't know exactly where it's located, but it's called Camp Jomsburg. And they're going to be training Ukrainian soldiers over here. So, very good to see this. This is not too far away from Ukraine, so it'll be easy to train these soldiers and get them right back into Ukraine if they need to get them to the front line. And Norway's really helping out with this, probably funding a large majority of it inside of Poland, right next to Ukraine's borders. So, very good to see. And huge shout out to Norway for helping out with that. Now, Max 25, Ukraine already has interceptor drones capable of shooting down jet Shaheeds, deputy head of the OP Polisa. So we've got Ukraine confirming today that they now have interceptor drones that can shoot down jet Shaheeds. Okay, so these are going to be Shahed drones that are no longer driven by a propeller, much slower, easier to shoot down. We know that Russia is deploying Shahed drones that are jet powered now. They fly much faster and harder to intercept. And apparently, Ukraine does have interceptor drones now that are capable of taking these down. They have just announced that today. So it's very good news to hear as we know that Russia is slowly moving towards only deploying jet powered UAVs over Ukraine. Now for Max 25, Russia is becoming a serious threat to Europe, to NATO, to all sober-minded countries in the world, and Europe is only just beginning to rebuild its defenses, Estonian Prime Minister said to the Times. He called on his European NATO allies to start joint arms purchases and seize almost 200 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to financially rebuild Ukraine. He says, quote, before we even considered a bit paranoid when we talked about threats from Russia, but now everything we talked about in the Baltics, Poland, or Scandinavia has become real, he said. Here's a report today. Russia is a threat to all countries, says Estonian Prime Minister. Kristen Michael says Europe must rebuild its defenses and prepare itself for Kremlin sabotage. So Estonia coming out today and confirming the obvious that Russia is a threat to Europe. Estonia considering they're right on the border with Russia. They've got a lot more worries than maybe some nations like Germany or the UK being further away from the front line and being right next to Russia. If a war were to break out, Estonia is going to be right here on the defense line for NATO. So clearly they are concerned about this. The Estonian Prime Minister warning that Russia not only being a threat, but they need to rebuild their defenses and prepare for any potential attack from Russia in the future. So Estonia just coming out and confirming that we could see a war here in the future and they need to get prepared. All right, now from Null reports, Lithuania may have concealed information about a possible Russian drone incursion on September 10th, coinciding with mass drone violations over Poland. Former Speaker Saulius Skvernelis, if I'm saying his name right, accused the Defense Ministry of pressuring the military to suppress data, calling it a threat to national security. An official inquiry is expected soon. Very interesting, this former speaker out of Lithuania, concerned about these drone flights of drone incursions, coming from the Russians, where we had multiple times that Russian drones were confirmed to be over Lithuanian airspace. There was a report just about a month or two ago where we had a Russian drone that flew directly over Vilnius. It eventually crashed, and the Lithuanian authorities stayed very quiet for several days. Then all of a sudden they reported, oh, hey, we got a drone that crashed over here. Where just days before, there was literally video footage coming out from Vilnius showing a Russian Garan or Shahed drone flying directly over their airspace. So Lithuania may be showing here that they don't want to show off a lot of information that these drones are entering into their territory. And why is the military doing that? Why are they concealing this information? That definitely shows a lot of weakness inside of Lithuania, considering that Lithuania has been attacked by these drones numerous times. There was just a report, I think just about a week or so ago, that we had drones entering into Lithuania at the same time that Poland came under attack on Wednesday. So very crazy information there. Now from Null reports, overnight, Russia launched 84 attack drones and 3 S-300 missiles from multiple directions. Ukrainian air defense shot down or jammed 59 drones, mostly Shaheeds and Garans. Despite successful interceptions, 25 drones and several missiles struck 13 locations. So we had 87 munitions going into Ukraine overnight. 59 out of these 84 drones were either shot down or suppressed by electronic warfare. We also had 3 S-300 missiles that were being fired into Ukraine overnight as well. So we clearly did have some damages, at least in Kramatorsk. That's where we had some glide bombs that were being dropped over there, but no reports today on any damages from drones or anything like that. So very good to see there. Now from Kyiv Independent, these are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of September 15th, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In our final update here, Russia's losses as of September 15th, 910 troops, 2 AFVs, 84 vehicles and fuel tanks, 0 tanks, 35 artillery systems, 323 UAVs, and 1 MLRS. And on top of that, 1 special equipment we have right over here. So very good to see yet again another MLRS launcher being destroyed. These are multiple launch rocket systems that fire a lot of different rockets at once into Ukraine. So very good to see they knocked out another one of these. We've been seeing 1 to 2 per day over the last week or so that have been destroyed. 35 artillery systems, pretty good number here. And 0 tanks and 2 AFVs, very small amounts that we've been seeing here for a while. Vehicles and fuel tanks, about average numbers there. Same with troop losses. So no major fluctuations in destruction to Russian troop losses or military equipment on the Russian side. But aside from that, guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for today's date on September 15th, 2025. And I hope you all have a great week and enjoy your Monday out there. Let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.